Blog Talk Radio.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Franchise Interviews, where we're asking the entrepreneur who owns one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. My co-host, Don Johnson, is off for Thanksgiving today. And if you've ever dreamed of owning your own business, then you've come to the right place. We got a great show today. We're doing something a little different. On November 7th and 8th, I attended a national conference for the Collegiate Entrepreneur organization. We had over 1,600 people attend the event. And I'm going to be doing an encore edition of a presentation I did called The Franchise Alternative. And that's coming up in just a moment. So stick around because we got a great show.
Franchise Interviews. For over 2 years now, Franchise Interviews has been giving you an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship.
Through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising.
And our weekly franchise radio show, where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisors, franchisees, franchise authors, experts, and attorneys.
And our free franchise newsletter, which is a must-read for anyone looking to buy a franchise.
And don't forget to listen to our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919.
That's 610-905-2919.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Franchise Interviews, where we're asking the entrepreneur who owns one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. My co-host, Don Johnson, is taking off for Thanksgiving, so I have the mic to myself today. So today we have a very interesting show, something a little different. It was 3 weeks ago from today. I actually headed out to Chicago and I did a presentation called The Franchise Alternative for the Collegiate Entrepreneur. And it was a wonderful event. We had 1,600 people attend the event, did the presentation twice, and went very well. Not everyone got to attend the presentation, so actually what we're doing is we're going to do an encore edition of the Franchise Alternative for the Collegiate Entrepreneur. I thought I'd start off talking a little bit about myself and how I got involved in franchising really by accident. As many of you know, and as some of you don't know, we actually had a lot of new subscribers to our newsletter last week. We had 30 new subscribers. We got involved in franchising by accident. I was working for a company called Venture Direct Worldwide and working on a business opportunity website. And I thought a great client for the website would be franchisors. So I attended my very first franchise show at the Jacob Javits Center and was really quite amazed. My expectations of franchising at that time, I was expecting to run into guys like Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's and Burger King. I was thinking toward a lot of food franchises, and when I got there, was really very surprised. I mean, there were shoe repair franchises, there were billboard franchises, newspaper franchises, you name it, they had it, and that just fascinated me. So spent a year building this website for Venture Direct, and it was about a year later I was having, I guess what you can call like an entrepreneurial seizure, and wanted to create my own franchise website. So I teamed up with a business partner in Florida, and we called the website Franchise America. It did very, very well. We had the website for it was about 4 or 5 years, and then it was sold to one of our biggest competitors, and found myself out of the franchising business. I missed it so much, started writing a free newsletter, and that newsletter eventually led to a weekly radio show, is what you're kind of hearing today. And last week we celebrated our 100th show, and we've been doing the show now for 2 years, and it's just been a wonderful experience. So some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today, a little agenda. We'll start off with what is franchising, and I think that's a great place to start because if you have listened to our show in the past, one of the things, the show is very pro-franchising. Our newsletter is very pro-franchising. Don and I are very pro-franchising. However, franchising is certainly not for everybody. So I think that's a great place to start. I'll talk a little bit about numbers that count, the impact that franchising has had on our economy in the United States, something called the entrepreneurial scale. A gentleman named Nick Bibby several years ago wrote a wonderful article called Entrepreneurial Types, and I'll kind of touch upon that as well. The new franchise disclosure document, and my advice to aspiring entrepreneurs who are looking to buy a franchise. And if you'd like a copy of this presentation, so we know how many people are listening, you could actually get a free copy of it, a hard copy like PowerPoint presentation, or actually we'll just send it out to you by email. If you email me at marty@franchiseinterviews.com, we'll shoot that out to you today, and you'll have a nice slideshow of it as well. So let's start off with something very basic, the definition of franchising. And a lot of people don't know this, but franchise is a French word meaning to license. I'm going to throw some different definitions out to you, and I guess that's the professor in me, and I didn't mention that in the beginning of my introduction. I'm also a professor for Kaplan University, and I've been teaching on the college level now for 7 years, primarily business courses, and I also have a post-MBA in entrepreneurial studies. Franchising is the right or license granted by a company to an individual or group to market its products or services in a specific territory. That definition comes from dictionary.com. The company offering the license is the franchisor, and the person buying the license is the franchisee. These two individuals, the franchisor and the franchisee, very, very different people. One's at the North Pole and one's at the South Pole. I'd say their genetic makeup is very, very different. However, the two are very dependent on each other for success. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in 5 minutes. Franchising is also a legal relationship, a system for expanding and distributing goods and services. Let's say I'm a fitness center and I don't have the money to open up 500 fitness centers. So I decide to franchise the concept, and I have aspiring entrepreneurs invest in the concept. And that would save a lot of money, because if you could imagine how expensive it would be to open up 500 fitness centers between equipment and advertising, et cetera, it would really be quite overwhelming. So it's a great way to grow your business. The International Franchise Association, you can get a ton of great information on franchising from franchise.org, and that website is by the IFA. They define franchising as follows: a continuing relationship in which the franchisor provides a license privilege to do business, plus assistance in organizing training, merchandising, and management in return for a consideration from the franchisee. And the word training is very important. I'm going to talk more about that as well. And what you'll find in franchising is the training is not a one-shot deal where you go to their corporate headquarters for several weeks. The training today, and I find the franchisees today are a lot more smarter, more educated than they've ever been because of technology. The franchisees are attending webinars and online conferences, and it's really an exciting time in franchising. This ongoing business relationship includes several things. The product, so the product could be hamburgers, could be a service such as, let's say, non-medical senior care. And if you're a frequent listener to our radio show, you'll know that Don and I have been talking a lot about this industry. In fact, I think we probably mentioned it last week on our 100th show as well. And also the trademark, as well as the entire business concept itself, from marketing strategy and planning, operational standards. If you've ever had the opportunity to see an operations manual for a franchise, it's really quite overwhelming. And that operation manual could be as sophisticated as from when you come in the morning and turn on the lights to when you go home at the end of the day and turn off the lights, and everything else in between. So very, very detailed. Quality control and ongoing assistance. And again, so that ongoing assistance is very, very important. And that's a big part of the training as well. And also guidance and supervision. The analogy I give with franchising, it's similar to a student-teacher relationship or a player-coach relationship. If you've ever had the pleasure of teaching someone or coaching someone, you know that critical element to doing both are really based on trust and respect. So one of the questions that I ask prospective franchisees, or if I know that someone's interested in buying a franchise, one of the questions that typically comes up is, are you teachable or are you coachable? If the answer is no, I would certainly steer somebody away from franchising. So very, very important. Are you teachable? Are you coachable? Here's another definition, or say, in other words, the franchise relationship is grounded in sacred trust and also mutual respect. And that comes from franchise author Joe Matthews, wrote a wonderful book called Street Smart Franchising. And I think it's such a powerful word, sacred trust and mutual respect. Franchising is a method of being in business for yourself, not by yourself. That's a common expression about franchising. You see that quite frequently. It's a commercial and business marriage. And, not to diminish the sanctity of marriage, but typically when you're buying a franchise, you're making a 10-year commitment. So in some cases, it outlasts a marriage. It's a little longer. So, again, very important. It's a business in a box. And franchising, and I think this is probably the most important, or I think best definition of franchising over my 10 years of being involved in franchising. It's a system of doing business so you get the same result every single time. And I'm going to say that again. Franchising is a system of doing business so you get the same result every single time. This is why it's so important to understand franchising and what it is. What you're actually buying is a system, a method of doing things so you get the same result every single time. If you stray from the system, it can be quite dangerous in franchising. And when people are so entrepreneurial in nature that they can't stick to a system, it could be quite dangerous. So there are alternatives for those types of people, just so you know, that I just described, but very, very important. One of my favorite quotes to help you understand franchising, it came, and I'm very proud, when I was making this presentation called The Franchise Alternative, a lot of the information that I got came from our weekly radio show. A lot of great quotes. Here's one of them, a quote from one of the top franchisees at Liberty Tax Services by a franchisee called Dan Castellini. Now, take into consideration what I just said. Dan Castellini is one of the best or top franchisees at Liberty Tax, and we have hundreds and hundreds of franchisees. There might even be thousands at this point. Dan says this, I don't want to invent anything. I'm not creative. Just give me a plan that I can execute. And when he said that, I said, wow, that really describes franchising in a nutshell. It describes the characteristic of a successful franchisee, if you want to get into like his genetic makeup. And also, what did Dan do to achieve all this success? Well, he followed the system. Here's another great quote in franchising. It describes how important it is to follow the system of a franchise. And this also came from our show and came from a book quoted by Julie Bennett. And Julie quoted this phrase or quote on our show. It says this, if the procedures manual said to write all reports with my left hand in red ink on Monday through Wednesday and with my right hand in black ink on Thursday and Friday, I would do it. And that quote came from Becky Korchon, who is a very successful franchisee at Express Personnel Services. So once again, the importance of following the system. And that goes back to that definition that I just referenced by Jill Matthews, talking about that sacred trust in the system. Very, very important. So what are the benefits of franchising? Well, there's many. There's hundreds, and I could spend the whole day talking about all the different benefits of franchising. There's a couple things I do want to mention. Franchising doesn't discriminate. And what I mean by that is this. You can have a PhD or you can have a GED, or not even have graduated from high school. If you follow the system, you're going to achieve just as much success as anyone else. All right? So very, very important. Franchising doesn't discriminate. Franchising also eliminates the guesswork. And what I mean by that is this. It makes it a lot easier. And Don and I have referenced this on the last couple of shows. Take, for instance, what we're going through now. The economy is kind of slow. Many say that we're in a recession and, things are really tough. Most franchisors have been through this kind of time. So it's really very important. You don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel. You don't have to think as hard. And I hate to say that, but when you're buying a franchise, again, that's really what you're buying is. It really saves you a lot of time from going out and taking your own market research and things of that nature. That could be a lot of work. So it eliminates the guesswork. And again, go back to that trust element. What is franchising? Well, here are some numbers I want to throw at you. Total initial investment can range from $20,000 for the smallest franchise venture, say it's a kiosk, to $6.5 million for a hotel franchise. Let's say it's like a franchise like Holiday Inn. Franchise owners also pay royalties, an average of 6.7% of gross revenue, according to the International Franchise Association. Now, take note of what I just said there, that the franchisees are paying an average of 6.7% of gross revenue. So if you've ever taken an accounting course, that number is not net. Okay, there's a big difference between gross and net. So every dollar that you basically make, or let's say every $100 that you make, you're writing a check for $6.70 that's being paid to the franchisor. That's important. You should know that. All right. Franchisees get an operating manual and a training support, including marketing and advertising guidance. In return, they pay recurring fees and royalties, which I was mentioning earlier, and they must follow sometimes restrictive rules and often changing methods of the franchisor. Now, if you're afraid of rules or you don't like rules, the reason I read some of that definition, again, there's some duplication there, you have to really be able to follow rules. If you can't, once again, I'd kind of steer you away from this whole franchising thing. Numbers that count. Direct contributions to the U.S. economy. Across the nation, 909,253 franchise businesses employed more than 11 million workers and generated $881 billion worth of goods and services in 2005, according to the most recent figures by the International Franchise Association. From 2001 to 2005, the number of franchise establishments jumped 4.3% annually, and the jobs in those businesses grew 3% annually, according to the IFA in Washington. And here's another interesting one. In 2006, nearly 3,000 established franchise brands expanded their unit totals by an average of 4%, and more than 300 companies began franchising for the first time, according to the International Franchise Association and FranData. Within the 3,000 systems, there's about 80 different industries that franchise. That can be a little overwhelming if you think about it, having 3,000 different choices for a franchise opportunity. Now, again, most people have their mindset on a particular industry, or that's usually where they'll start. They'll have an idea that they want to buy, like, let's say, a food franchise. Or let's say you knew for a fact you didn't want to go into a food franchise. It's probably a good place to start because it probably eliminates about half of those 3,000 right there alone. So it goes to show you the impact that food franchises have had on franchising overall. Here's some more numbers that count. According to the Small Business Administration, roughly 30% of all non-franchise businesses fail within the first year. Now, that's a big wow. And again, when I was at the presentation several weeks ago, I read that twice. According to the SBA, roughly 30% of all non-franchise businesses fail within the first year. Now, let's look at another number. That number falls to 5%. Or failure rate, or 5% failure rate when discussing franchises, according to one Commerce Department study. Very big difference. So bottom line with that number is that the success rates for franchises are significantly or exponentially higher than a non-franchise opportunity. Right? There's lots of reasons for that. So what would be some reasons that a franchise can fail? Well, number one reason, and go back to the definition that I was discussing about 10 minutes ago, a bad system. Right? That's the number one reason why a franchise would fail, is a bad system. Number two is interesting, a bad location. And by the way, these top 5 reasons for franchise failures, it came from a USA Today article written by Steve Strauss. Number 3, inadequate advertising or marketing. Number 4, too much competition. And number 5, inadequate startup capital. Another thing you should know is that not all franchises are created equal. There's good franchises and there's bad franchises. Some are a good match for you, some will not be a good match for you. Here's some more numbers as far as total contributions to the U.S. economy. Franchise businesses demand products and services from other businesses and provide income to their workers and owners, who then spend their income and create still more income from other parties. You say, what is he talking about when he's reading that? I was doing a case study. This was, I want to say it was about 5-6 years ago, with some of my students from another college I was teaching at. And it was on a company called Quality Croutons, and I believe they're still around today. And picture this scenario, that you're sitting in Chicago, because I think that's where Quality Croutons is based, and you pick up the phone, and it's McDonald's on the other line. And McDonald's says to you, we want you to be the sole provider of croutons for our salads. Think about how ecstatic that person must have been after they hung up the phone to get an account like McDonald's. Right now, McDonald's is at about 31,000, 32,000 restaurants on the planet. So it's a pretty big fish that Quality Croutons landed. So what it's saying is that franchising has had impact, or a very big impact, on other businesses as well. So I thought that was a very important number. Take this factor into consideration, and franchise businesses are the cause of nearly 21 million jobs in the United States, and the cause of $2.31 trillion in annual output. So I think that's kind of significant. So why don't we take a little break here? I'm not used to doing all the talking. Don does a lot of chatting as well during the show. So kind of take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more franchise interviews.
Franchise Interviews. For over 2 years now, Franchise Interviews has been giving you an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship.
Through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising.
And our weekly franchise radio show, where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisors, franchisees, franchise authors, experts, and attorneys.
And our free franchise newsletter, which is a must-read for anyone looking to buy a franchise.
And don't forget to listen to our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919.
That's 610-905-2919.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Franchise Interviews, where we're asking the Franchipreneur who owns one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott, and my co-host, Don Johnson, is already off for Thanksgiving holiday. So, but he does tell me to wish all of our listeners and subscribers to our newsletter a very happy Thanksgiving, and Don will be back next Thursday for another show. So we're talking about a presentation that I made 3 weeks ago called The Franchise Alternative, and it's called The Franchise Alternative for the Collegiate Entrepreneur, but really applies to anyone who is interested in buying a franchise. Here's another number that counts. Subway recently hit 30,000, actually up to 30,045 restaurants in 88 countries. And I'm sure that number's up by now. From when I researched, that was like 4 or 5 weeks ago, so I suspect that number is up a bit. Don was talking last week about the top 200 franchise opportunities by Franchise Times magazine. Here's the entrepreneurs' top 12 from their top 500. And you're going to see some similarities if you heard the show last week as well. 7-Eleven is in the number one spot. 7-Eleven, by the way, is huge in countries like Japan. I mean, very, very big there. They have a whole very sophisticated system in Asia. Subway, number 2. Dunkin' Donuts, number 3. Pizza Hut, number 4. McDonald's, number 5. Sonic, number 6. KFC, number 7. Intercontinental Hotels Group, I believe that's Holiday Inn, is at number 8. Domino's is at number 9. Remax, number 10. UPS at number 11. And Ace Hardware is at number 12. Now, Entrepreneur has I like to say it's like a mathematical formula for determining the top 500 opportunities. They look at things like growth rate. They look at the number of years in business, the number of years franchising, percentages of terminations for their franchisees, any litigation that's going on between like franchisors and franchisees. So this whole mathematical formula that goes into their top 500. Just because a franchise is listed, let's say, like in the top 12, doesn't mean that those are the only ones that you should look at. It doesn't mean it's the best opportunity for you. Again, if you take that mathematical formula into consideration, that's how they come up with the numbers. So just something to consider. Now, there's something called the franchise rule, and this took place in 1979. What was going on was this. If you look at like the history of franchising, it was like in the 1970s. There was a lot of, I guess you could say, crooked franchisors that were really giving franchising a bad name. They were over-promising and really under-delivering, making some ridiculous promises. Some of those were shutting their phones down. You couldn't reach them, and really giving franchising a bad label. So the reputable franchises, like let's say your McDonald's, they appeal to government, and lawmakers created something called the franchise rule, and it took place in 1979. And I think it was really one of the greatest things that happened to business. Again, look at the economic impact that franchising has had on our economy here in the United States. It's really been amazing. What the franchise rule is, it's 23 items that a franchisor must provide by law to prospective franchisees. I'll read the 23 items very quickly. I'm not going to go over all of them because, once again, that would take about 5 hours of show time, and we don't have to do that for today. We'll dedicate a whole show to the FDD. In fact, we have had several shows talking about the FDD with like franchise attorneys like Nancy Lennard. So you can always go back to our archives and listen to those. Or if you have any questions specifically, you can even send me an email at marty@franchiseinterviews.com. So these 23 items that the franchisor must provide are as follows. Number one, the franchisor, its predecessors and affiliates. Number two, their business experience. That's very important. You want to look at the franchisor's experience. How long have they been involved in their industry? We've had guests on our show, and I've always been amazed at their business experience in their industry. One quick one that comes to mind was a franchise called Aristocare. And the woman that started Aristocare, she was one of the co-founders. She really incredible. I think she had like 25 years experience in the non-medical and medical senior care industry. So I always was amazed by that. So always look at the business experience of the franchisor as well. Hopefully they weren't working for, let's say, Macy's like 3 weeks ago. That's very important. So look at that. Litigation is also very important. Are there any lawsuits going on against the franchise? And again, lawsuits can really destroy a company. I think all of us have seen like news reports over the last 5-10 years what some lawsuits have done to, even like look at the pharmaceutical companies. It's really been overwhelming. Bankruptcy, initial franchise fees, other fees, initial investments. Number 8, restrictions on sources of products and services. Item 9, the franchisee's obligations. Item 10 talks about financing. Item 11, franchisor's obligations. Item 12, the territory that you're getting. Item 13, trademarks. Item 14, patents, copyrights, and proprietary information. Item 15, obligation to participate in the actual operation of the franchise business. Item 16, restrictions on what the franchisee may sell. Item 17, renewal, termination, transfer, and dispute resolution. Item 18, public figures. Item 19, which is getting a lot of, there's been one big change in the franchise disclosure document, is earning claims. One thing you should know about the earning claim sections is it is typically like an average number. And, one of the things I always tell my business students is be careful of averages because they could be kind of deceiving. Item 20 is the list of outlets, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because I think that's one of the most important elements in the franchise disclosure document. Now, again, this document that you're getting is really taking place, usually in the past has always been when you have a serious conversation with the franchisor, they were supposed to pass this book on to you or this franchise disclosure document. Item 21, financial statements. Item 22, contracts, and item 23, receipt. The elements or the item that I find extremely important, as I was just referencing, is item 20 of the franchise disclosure document, the ability to speak to current and former franchisees. So what would you ask a current franchisee? If you had someone's phone number, a current franchisee, let's say it was for Subway, what would you ask them? Well, there's really a list that you can really obtain from a lot of different websites. I suspect you could probably find that on franchise.org. I know we have it somewhere on our website, franchiseinterviews.com. I think it's on our Inside Tips page. Here's just a couple of them. Questions to current franchisees. How long has the franchisee operated the franchise? What was their background prior to becoming a franchisee? That's important. Where's the franchise located? Are they on a main strip or in a strip mall? Was the training the franchisor offered helpful in getting the business off the ground? Is the franchisor responsive to your needs? What's a typical day like? I always like that question, and that's typically a question that we'll ask on our weekly radio show when we have a franchisee or even the franchisor will say to them, what is a typical day like from the moment you get into the restaurant to the time you go home at the end of the day? Now, the great thing about the franchise disclosure document is it also includes former franchisees. It's a little more difficult sometimes to get in contact with former franchisees, but if you really want to, you'd be able to do that. Questions you would ask a former franchisee. What happened? Why are they no longer a franchisee? It doesn't necessarily mean the franchise was a bad system or just a bad franchise in general. There's hundreds of reasons why a franchise could go out of business. Perhaps someone was having marital problems, or whatever it may be. But take that into consideration. So the more people you ask, the better picture you're going to get. If you only talk to one person and that was a negative response, it's really not enough. We've had some guests on our show saying that you should probably speak to at least 50 or 60 former and present franchisees, to get a true picture of what's going on. So this could be quite overwhelming. I mean, this is really a lot of work. It's not something that you can make a decision within 2 to 3 weeks, I mean, you can't really give it a number, I mean, I say for me, it would probably take at least 6 months to 9 months to make an intelligent decision on buying a franchise. So very, very important. It's about 2 years ago, to date, we had a gentleman on our show named Nick Bibby. And Nick, I like to say, is a franchise expert, wrote a wonderful article called Entrepreneurial Types. And if you can determine your level of entrepreneurship on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being low and 10 being high, that could probably help you determine if franchising is for you or what type of entrepreneurial venture you should pursue. I'm always amazed that, a lot of people that we've had listen to the show, or even when I was making the presentation 3 weeks ago in Chicago, a lot of people came up to me and says, you know what, franchising is not for me. I would prefer the role of like an entrepreneur, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, or perhaps a business opportunity, or perhaps I want to be the franchisor. It was amazing how many people came up to me and says, you know what, I'm so entrepreneurial that I want to be the franchisor. I want to create a system. I'm a creator. I'm an inventor. So I'll talk a little bit about that. This entrepreneurial scale looks at a couple of different things. Again, it measures the level of entrepreneurship. Is it low? Is it high? It also talks about your level of risk. Is it low? Is it high? And also your level of independence, low or high. So let's take the first one, for example. You have an entrepreneur, or what's sometimes called a corporate entrepreneur. If you've ever heard of companies like 3M, and I bet you all of our listeners right now, you probably have Post-it notes somewhere in your office or somewhere in your home. I'm looking at some right now. The invention of an entrepreneur, okay, from the company 3M. Now, the great thing about being an entrepreneur is typically you're getting a steady paycheck, you're getting health benefits and things of that nature, so you don't have to worry. However, your level of entrepreneurship is probably a little lower when you're an entrepreneur. Your level of risk is definitely lower, and there's not as much risk. I mean, again, when you're working for a company, let's say it's 3M, very big company, has a long history, and also your level of independence, though, that's low. Okay, you're not as independent. You have somebody to typically answer to. You typically have bosses, so very important. The next level on the entrepreneurial scale, and again, we have a diagram of this. So again, if you email me at marty@franchiseinterviews.com, we'll send it out to you. And let's say it's on a scale of 1 to 10. The entrepreneur will probably be at a 1. The franchisee, or sometimes it was what we call the franchipreneur. We got that term from Jim Cohen, who was a guest on our show about 6 months ago. An entrepreneur who's a franchisee, let's say they're at the level of like 2 to 3 on the entrepreneurial scale. So the level of entrepreneurship is pretty low. Okay, so franchisees aren't really true entrepreneurs, so you can say. They have a little in them, but not a lot. The level of risk when you're a franchisee, if you look at the statistics or the success rates, go back to the one I was saying earlier that was referenced by the SBA, saying that only 5% of franchisees fail within the first year. That's a pretty big wow. So your level of risk is a lot lower, so that's a great thing. Your level of independence is still fairly low. Again, you can't just do what you want when you buy a franchise. All right, you have to follow the rules. It's very, very important. Now, if these two descriptions don't fit you, go higher on the entrepreneurial scale. Let's go to like a 5 or 6 level and talk about the business opportunity. Now, the business opportunity is different from the franchisee because you're buying a concept, but typically what happens is the person that's selling you the concept or selling you the business opportunity, they'll leave you alone. They'll make suggestions, but those are just suggestions. So the difference between the business opportunity and franchisee is one's a must. Okay, you have to follow rules when you're a franchisee. These rules come in the form of suggestions when you're buying a business opportunity. It's kind of like, this is what I suggest. You can take it or leave it. You can't do that with a franchise. And on the other end of the scale is the franchisor, or let's call them the entrepreneur, where the level of entrepreneurship is very high, level of risk very high, level of independence, if that's important, is very high. All right, so again, this is where the franchisee and the franchisor kind of come together. The two are very, very dependent on each other, as I was mentioning earlier. So if you're so entrepreneurial in nature, perhaps you should consider being or playing the role of an entrepreneur or the franchisor in creating a system. If you want to find out more information about where you are as far as entrepreneurial types or the entrepreneurial scale, you can go to the BibbyGroup.com website. Again, that was created, I believe it was created by Nick Bibby. And there's a little test you can take. It's like, I don't know if it comes in the form of an online test or whatever that may be. But that'll help you identify what type of entrepreneur are you. Are you an entrepreneur? Are you a franchisee? Should I go into a business opportunity? Or am I an entrepreneur? Very, very important to know. I think this is a critical step. If you were able to determine that, it would really save you a lot of time and frustration. Very important. Why don't we take one more quick break? And when we come back, I'm going to talk or give you my advice to aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise.
Franchise Interviews, For over 2 years now, Franchise Interviews has been giving you an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship.
Through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising.
And our weekly franchise radio show, where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisors, franchisees, franchise authors, experts, and attorneys.
And our free franchise newsletter, which is a must-read for anyone looking to buy a franchise.
And don't forget to listen to our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919.
That's 610-905-2919.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Franchise Interviews, where we're asking the Franchipreneur who owns one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott, and my co-host, Don Johnson, is off for Thanksgiving. And again, we wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving. And several weeks ago, I attended a national conference for the Collegiate Entrepreneur organization. We had 1,600 people attend the event and was a guest speaker, talking, of course, about franchising. And the presentation went really well. Unfortunately, not everyone who attended the event got to hear the presentation, so they wish it was taped. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to do a radio show the day before Thanksgiving so people can listen later on. And again, we now have a recording of it, so you can always go back and listen to it at your time. The next couple of things that I want to talk about, we've mentioned them on the show on several occasions, is my advice to aspiring entrepreneurs who are looking to buy a franchise. I'm going to quickly talk about franchise brokers, the importance of working with experts such as franchise attorneys or real estate experts, the importance of due diligence, some books that I recommend as well for franchising. And the great thing about our radio show is we've had most of the authors on our weekly radio show, and you can always go back and listen to them. We have a franchise books page on our website, franchiseinterviews.com, and you can hear interviews with Joe Matthews, author of Street Smart Franchising, Julie Bennett, who wrote a Franchise Times Guide to selecting, buying, and owning a franchise, and it's like 3 or 4 more. So, and they were all fantastic. Let's talk about franchise brokers for a second. Again, we've had about 4 or 5 different franchise brokers on our show up to this point, and I've been very impressed with really all of them that have been on our show. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all great, but the ones that have been on our show have been exceptional. Some of the big franchise broker companies that you should look towards if you are seeking a franchise broker is Franchise Inc., Matchpoint, FranNet, The Entrepreneur Source, and also Franchise. Now, this is a free service. Why is it a free service to you? Well, the franchise broker gets paid from the franchisor. Okay, so the franchisor essentially really becomes the client or the customer, I guess you could say, to the franchise broker. You should know that. Now, again, the ones that have been on our show have been exceptional, but sometimes there may be instances, and that doesn't mean they're all great, where some franchise brokers may steer you towards a franchise that's in their portfolio. Typically, the way it works is this. A franchise broker could have, let's say, 100 to 200 different franchise systems in their portfolio, and they may determine that you are perfect for, let's say, non-medical senior care. I was mentioning earlier that that's a booming industry right now. Well, they may not represent every non-medical senior care franchise, and one of those non-medical senior care franchises that are not in their portfolio could be a better match for you. All right, so that, once again, that's something that you should know. So take that into consideration. But overall, again, our experience of having franchise brokers on the show has been, we've heard some excellent stories and testimonials. So I think that's important. If location is important, and again, if you're buying a food franchise, which location would be a critical element, you may want to work with a real estate expert. Here's some great quotes on the topic of location. Great sites don't need as much marketing attention. You only pay for bad real estate. Always pay for better real estate. Those quotes actually came from Dan Rowe, who is the founder of FranceMart. We had Dan on our show. I want to say it was about a year ago. And there are companies out there that will help you find a location. Javelin Solutions, Ryan Cunningham, we had him on our show about a year and a half ago, spoke about the importance of location. You can actually hire an expert to help you with this whole thing and incorporate this fee into your loan package. So let's say, and I don't know what experts like Javelin Solutions charges. You can probably go to their website. I guess it's Javelin Solutions. I want to say it's .net. And you can actually listen to the show when we had Ryan on as well. But incorporate this fee into your loan package. Same thing with a franchise attorney. This is one of the most important elements, I think, is to work with not just an attorney, but keyword franchise attorney. Very, very important. Just an attorney, and most of us know attorneys. I know attorneys. You know attorneys. Don has attorneys in his family. However, if he was buying a franchise or I was buying a franchise, I would never use the attorneys that I know. Reason being is that they have to be a franchise attorney. It is a totally different animal and scenario. So it's very, very important to work with a franchise attorney. Once again, incorporate their fees into your loan package. As far as recommended reading, Solving the Puzzle of Owning a Franchise is a wonderful book that you can get from, I think you can go to Franchise Inc. and get a copy of that book as well. Franchise Times Guide to Selecting, Buying, and Owning a Franchise. And again, we have these books listed on our website as well. Street Smart Franchising by Joe Matthews. The most important book I think you can ever read when it comes to franchising or when it comes to entrepreneurship is The E-Myth and also Awakening the Entrepreneur Within by Michael Gerber. It's one of those books, and Michael Gerber has been referred to on our show probably 20 to 30 times up to this point. It's really amazing the impact that he's had on franchising, but the book is that powerful. So again, read The E-Myth and Awakening the Entrepreneur Within by Michael Gerber. And also Joe LaBava wrote a fantastic book called Researching the Different Franchising. And I don't have the exact title in front of me, but it was another wonderful book, and you can actually get that book in ebook as well. So new technology as well, very important. Other franchise resources, franchise.org is the International Franchise Association. I was referencing them earlier. They have a wonderful, very informative website, which is so much information from online classes to really you name it. So go to franchise.org, franchiseinterviews.com. Again, if you're listening to the show, go to our website. We've recorded over 100 shows up to this point, over 100 hours. And I tell that our listeners or readers to our newsletter, if you listen to every one of our shows, you will probably know more about franchising than anyone on the planet Earth. So it's really that powerful. Franchise Times Magazine is I think, one of the best magazines dedicated to franchising. Franchise shows and there's a lot of franchise shows taking place throughout the country. A couple tips when you're going to a franchise show. Go prepared. I'm always amazed, and I've done a lot of these franchise shows, how many people will just come up to a booth and say, so what do you guys do? And the franchisor is never going to take you as serious when you approach them in that manner. So really go prepared when you go to a franchise show. Also, and you've heard me joke about it on the show, go hungry, because there's just wonderful samples. I mean, there's pizza and there's ice cream and there's coffee, and you can typically walk out of there with a stomach ache, but you really get to try some wonderful samples of food. And what else? Discovery Day is another great way to kind of get to know the franchisor, get to know the leaders of the franchisor, see if it's a match. Remember, I've compared this franchising thing to a marriage in many cases. You want to make sure that there's a match between the franchisee and the franchisor. Are you compatible? Do you like them? I mean, is this someone that you would like to work with the next 10 years? So these are very, very important things to consider. And once you've decided, if franchising is for you, one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, what do you want this franchise to do for you? We had a wonderful guest on our show, Dr. Robert Needham, and he said something I thought was very powerful. He said that franchising is a means to an end. And what I mean by that is this. We had a guest on our show, franchisees to fish window cleaning. And these two gentlemen, they worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and were happy with their jobs, but they were a little frustrated because they were working 60 hours a week, and they never really had a chance to spend time with their family or their children. So they wanted to go into their own business, and they went into fish window cleaning, and now they have time a lot more time, to spend with their families, go to baseball games and recitals and things of that nature. So very, very important. What do you want this franchise to do for you? And that's going to help you in making a decision as well. And it was kind of interesting because fish window cleaning actually went through the franchise broker route as well. So, and again, if you want a copy of this presentation, you can email me at marty@franchiseinterviews.com. And once again, on behalf of Don and myself, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. And we'll see you next week with another great show from Franchise Interviews. Thanks, everyone. Take care.